It's interesting. There's so many more slides. We don't need to go through them all. I guess I would ask your view on, what does this year's report suggest about where we're going for the next couple of years? And if the trend lines continue, and there's no guarantee they will, but what do you see as some major trends that you would expect to be happening in, cloud 2022 or 2024? What do you say with your crystal ball?
Well, I think certainly continued adoption of cloud. That's no surprise to anybody.
Hmm.
But I think one really interesting factor that's coming into play is the public clouds offering their private version.
Mm.
So we've got things like AWS Outpost, we've got Azure Stack. Those showed a lot of interest and more adoption than I would have thought.
Hmm.
That even seems possible, honestly.
Mm.
And Google Anthos, also some interest there. So I think we're starting to see this idea of, bringing the cloud to the on-prem environment. And then the second thing that we've seen is we have seen, containers growing for a number of years. We've been tracking that change for a
Right.
number of years, but
Yep.
that's become really very mainstream. Again, the breadth of adoption is maybe still narrow in large enterprises, but that, and even starting to see some kind of on-prem versions of that with things like Pivotal Cloud Foundry, now bought by VMware, as well
Hmm.
as OpenShift from Red Hat.
Hmm.
Those are some interesting trends. So the face of hybrid is changing, I think, and we're going to see a different view of hybrid than what we saw 3 years ago.
Well, a different view of hybrid in terms of the nature of private cloud. What do you mean by a different view of
Yeah.
hybrid?
Yeah, because in the past it was like, I'm going to use OpenStack on-prem, or I'm going to use vSphere on-prem. And OpenStack kind of stalled because of the difficulty of doing that within the
Hmm.
enterprise. So it's
Hmm.
primarily like a hosted offering these days. And VMware itself, kind of pure VMware vSphere, isn't really, misses a lot of the cloud aspects.
Hmm.
So now we're bringing in some options for private cloud that start to feel a lot closer to cloud, with Outpost, with Azure Stack, with Anthos, as well as with Cloud Foundry and OpenShift, where we have these container-based private cloud options. So that's where I think the private part of hybrid cloud is going to start to look a lot more like public cloud.
I guess the thing I find somewhat surprising about that is that I think there would have been a sense maybe 2010, 2012, where people would have said, hey, private cloud is dying. It's all going to move to the public cloud. In the year 2020, private cloud is going to be so passe that we can't even talk about it anymore. But in reality, companies have moved to the cloud a little slower than perhaps people thought. Therefore, the private cloud is still alive. In fact, some of the ventures are actually growing in private cloud, according to the report.
Exactly, exactly. So that face, we thought the same thing a few years ago. Will private cloud be dead in a few years? But it's kind of seen a rebirth in a different form than what we
Hmm.
saw a few years ago.
Right.
I think the one other thing is the growth of the PaaS services from the cloud providers, and
Right.
especially container as a service and serverless. When we first started doing cloud cost management stuff 5+ years ago, we used to say 90% of the spend is in compute. And that's shifting. People are putting more and more stuff in these PaaS services, whether it's database as a service, container as a service, serverless. So that's starting to get to be a bigger component of cloud spend, a
Hmm.
bigger component of your footprint. So that implies a whole different approach to managing costs and optimizing costs, which will be challenging at first. And it implies a whole different approach to governance. So I think that's going to be the next wave, is figuring out how to get our arms around that.
It's going to be interesting.
It is.
Kim, I thank you very much for sharing your expertise in it. It's a fascinating report. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye, James.